You were mentioning, you had written for The Root at one point.
Mm-hmm.
Would you consider yourself to have been a leftist at that point?
I've never been a leftist. No, I've always had what people would deem traditional views. I'm conversant in sort of, and at that point when I was writing for The Root, I would say they were more liberal than leftists.
Right.
They've definitely taken a harder shift now, I'd say, over the last 7 years.
But you had critical thinking capabilities, seems like a smart guy, and so you were just sticking to your principles and what you think makes the most sense. When we talk about the leftists and the socialists, I don't think, critical thought extends very far.
No.
There are some people I've met who have been fairly smart and are just wrong, but there's a lot of people who just, I got to pull up this story. We got a good one. From Newsweek.com. Socialist magazine, Current Affairs, fires staff for trying to organize workers' co-op. How many times do you need to see these stories to realize that these leftist institutions, that magazines or media publications, they claim to be progressive or have socialist values, and then the moment someone tries to unionize, which is like a core tenet of, labor rights, they fire these people.
Yep.
You know what the funniest thing about it is like, for me, they would call me right or far right or whatever, and I'm like, more power to my staff if I don't care or whatever. Like, I really don't understand why. The Young Turks did it. They had that story where like some guy was trying to unionize and Cenk Uyghur's like screaming at him and like slams papers on the ground, and I'm like, you guys are the progressives who advocate for this.
Yeah.
So let me just read a little bit and then we'll dive in. The founder of the Socialist magazine, Current Affairs, has reportedly effectively fired several staff members after they tried to organize a workers' co-op, former employees claimed in a letter on Wednesday. The letter, which was addressed to comrades by several employees of the print and digital magazine that focuses on topics from a left-wing perspective, said they had been effectively fired by the founder, Nathan J. Robinson, who has also authored a book, Why You Should Be a Socialist. Is that grifting? Wow. In a tweet accompanying the letter, managing and amusements editor Lydia Gold wrote, I am grieved to tell you that Nathan J. Robinson has effectively fired me and most of the Current Affairs staff because we're trying to organize into a workers' co-op. This isn't a bit. I wish it was.
Wow.
I don't think these, I guess what he said was that, socialism in practice is a lot easier, or I'm sorry, in theory is a lot easier than it is in practice. So why would you fire them though? I really don't know. Look, I run a company. We've got employees. And when these stories have come up, I've always thought like, I don't understand why these people care so much.
Yeah. I mean, as someone who has, some experience working in the government, unionization is a tricky issue because in some respect, collective bargaining and the benefits of being in a union, but oftentimes it makes doing work somewhat more difficult, which is why I think one of the reasons you see a lot of left-leaning institutions fight against charter schools is because charter schools typically don't have unionized teachers. The teachers unions don't have as much power over charters as they do over government schools. So, I could see how it gets complicated. An employer might feel like, if their staff unionizes, that they are going to lose some power, which they very well might. But the irony, the delicious irony, is that this happens all the time with the left. I think you've seen it with defund the police.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, my mind always goes to Seattle, where the mayor allowed, radicals and anarchists to take over, part of her city. And she said, Chop Chaz is a summer of love. Until a member of the city council marched them to her house.
Yep.
Then she shut it down like the next day.
Yep.
And you see this all of the time where it's like they make rules for the little people to follow that they don't want to follow themselves. And I think that is one of the fundamental flaws and weaknesses of that particular line of thinking, that worldview, is that it's always going to eat itself.
You know what I was thinking? I'm just like, this guy for this Socialist magazine is probably, and I mean this, to the right of me politically.
Right.
Because as much, I think, look, I can favor certain economic policies, but I really do think, well, I'll put it this way, idealistically, I'm pretty left libertarian. Realistically, I'm kind of like centrist, like moderate liberal type. Although that's politically homeless at this point because I don't know what makes sense. But, when I'm thinking about a union forming, I'm like, yeah, I don't care if they come and they're like, hey, we want all these things. I'll be like, is it possible? Okay. I don't know why I need all that power or why I need to be debating people if like this is what they're looking for. Now, I can certainly understand when they bring in external unions and then they just, can meddle in the affairs and all that stuff that I get. But I think about like Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks when he snapped at his employees. It's because they personally want power.
Right.
They're authoritarian.
Right.
They're capitalists. Hey, more power to them.
Right.
But they're masquerading as progressives.
Right. I mean, it's the same thing going back to BLM. Right. They, by the end of 2020, Patrisse Cullors I think she had a deal with Time Warner.
Oh, she had 5 houses.
She had amassed a pretty impressive real estate portfolio. I mean, the leaders were living pretty high on the hog, and it just goes to show you that capitalism in our country, as imperfect as it is, and really a lot of it is corporatism, but let's, for the sake of argument, capitalism is so powerful in this country that even Marxists can find a market and make money off of it.
Yes.
Capitalism is so powerful that even the socialists are capitalists.
Yeah. So
Man.
You saw that. For all their talk, and whether it's them or Colin Kaepernick, I mean, these are some well-heeled revolutionaries. That's for sure.
It's true.
It's like a revolution in the revolution. They decided, we can just make money doing this.
Yeah.
It's like the Ibram Kendi thing you mentioned.
Yeah.
He's not actually going to come out and be like, hey, this ID thing is wrong.
No.
I mean, there's a great opportunity for him to like, think about this. If he was principled, so maybe he will do it. I don't think he will. Maybe he will. Could you imagine? He has an opportunity right now to come out and say, I told you this.
Yeah.
I told you the state would do this. De Blasio is racist, and he's doing it right now. And in fact, people would probably be like, De Blasio is racist. We don't like him.
And that's why part of the reason I wrote the article, because I would be truly curious to see whether he would take such a principled position, or any of his acolytes, not just him, right? He may not do it, but to see anyone who believes in his version of quote unquote anti-racism, I would love to see them actually take that principled step and say, we said that any policy that has disproportionate impacts on different ethnic groups is racist. This one has it. We're calling it racist, and we stand by it.
Imagine getting to stand up at a press conference and say, we warned you.
Yeah.
We begged you.
Yeah.
The government would do this. And it is a Democrat who did it in our faces. You'd have just like, look at, we're right.
Yeah.
But they don't want to do it because then they're actually going up against their political agenda.
Right. And I mean, talk about strange bedfellows. If Ibram Kendi ends up being the patron saint of the right's anti-vaccine mandate push, right? If he is on a stage with Ted Cruz and they're both saying we're both against vaccine mandates, we may be against them for different reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everybody would freak out at that point.
See, that's principle, right?
Right.
So, I'll take it to Joe Biden. He gave that speech on Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And a lot of conservatives are just saying it was bad, it was awful. Then you had Clarissa Ward, CNN reporter on the ground in Afghanistan. She's wearing the burqa. And she said, they're chanting death to America, but they're also seemingly friendly. It's bizarre. And what happened? A lot of conservatives cut out the "it's bizarre" part, and only showed the first part. It's very clear when you add the "it's bizarre," she was contrasting what they were saying and doing as two different things.
Right.
Granted, I do think her words were poorly chosen, but in terms of Biden's speech, Cassandra Fairbanks, a good friend of mine, said she actually thought it was a good speech because he said things that needed to be said, like we shouldn't be passing the buck on this war, we shouldn't be sending our kids to go fight this. But when you're speaking on principle, you will often find that the people who follow you get mad because they might be speaking on tribal reasons. So, following someone like Mike Cernovich, he's criticized Trump a lot. And the Trump supporters get mad at him like, oh, what happened to you? And he's like, I'm being honest. Yeah. I'm telling you exactly how I feel, as I've always done. So if Kendi and these other critical race theorists were actually functioning on principle, they'd have come out in 2 seconds and been like, no way. No.
Absolutely. And I mean, I know there are all different types of policy areas, social, domestic, economic, political, that a person like Kendi could apply, his principles. If Black Lives Matter was really an honest slogan and an honest organization, they would plant themselves in front of every Planned Parenthood in the Black community, which Planned Parenthoods typically target communities of color. And the same people who will say we're against liquor stores and the people pushing cigarettes in low-income Black communities, for some reason they don't take that same approach when it comes to Planned Parenthood. But Kendi wouldn't do that, because in New York City, and a lot of people don't know this, about half of all of black women's pregnancies end in abortion in New York City. So half of all black babies are aborted in New York City. If you want to talk about something that's systemic, there it is. But again, his anti-racism is only useful to their position to the extent that it furthers their political goals. So certain things they'll say, you know what, we'd rather talk about these 19 police shootings a year than talk about, you know, street crime or abortion or the state of urban education. You know, those are different issues for a different day.
So I just looked it up on Live Action, or is it Live Action?
Live action.
Live action. Mm-hmm.
And they said that black women account for 38% of all U.S. abortions. That sounds really creepy.
That's
to
true.
me.
That's true. That's true. And so that's why, for me, I always question. I think, like, how do I put this? I mean, someone really has to be doing a number on you for you to think that it makes sense to give 90% of your political support to a party whose central policy, or one of them, I'd probably say the top three, is to keep your population at exactly 13%.
That's what I was thinking when you started talking about it. I'm like, Planned Parenthood's been around for a long, long time. What is it, 100 years or something?
Yeah.
And I was looking at a map from Planned Parenthood, and they do have a bunch of minority area centers. And I'm thinking, like, I wonder what the population size would have been for the black and Hispanic community if Planned Parenthood wasn't doing that.
Yeah.
And considering 38% of all abortions, that's an extremely disproportionate number.
Absolutely. And I mean, again, the Democrats talk a good game about race, but you know where their policy priorities lie, because every time a Supreme Court nominee comes up, they don't ask them their views on Brown versus Board of Ed. They ask them their views on Roe versus Wade. So that is one of their central policies. And for whatever reason, you know, black leaders don't question it. And so I always ask people, I say, do you think the position of most black Americans would be the same on abortion if it was Republicans who were pushing it? If Ted Cruz was the one saying, no, we need more abortion clinics in Houston and Dallas, do you really think that black voters would respond the same? And I've yet to get a good answer to that. But that's one of those things where, for me, when I write, part of what I'm trying to do is recapture some of the territory that the left has taken, while some of the leaders in my community, quote unquote, have been asleep at the wheel.
That's a strategy for conservatives, I guess.
Yeah.
Just come out and be like, you know what, we thought about it. Yeah, they're right. Keep doing it. And then have people be like, wait, but they're racists.
I mean,
and then all of a sudden, like, no, it's okay. We agree.
That's the age-old thing, right? If you want teenagers to stop doing something, just get their parents to do it and say, hey, look, we're getting tattoos all over our face. We're smoking, 6 packs a day.
We're just like you now.
And this, I don't want to be like my parents. So,
I have a question. They say that what's the saying, that the path to the electorate in the black community is through the church, or something to that effect. You've heard something like that?
I have. I think that may be an outdated way of thinking, particularly for younger generations.
Right.
Now, people, let's say, black voters over 65 who are still heavily church going, I could see that. So, I mean, you saw that in the Democratic primary where Biden captured South Carolina, on the strength of a lot of older black female voters, many of whom are church going. The younger demographic, that is a lot less the case. So you can see that shift in the civil rights movement from a faith-based movement into a more sort of secular humanist movement. BLM has nothing to do,
and now Marxist,
right? And outright Marxist. So I think for younger generations that's less the case. I think in many respects, the church has a lot less influence in the black community than it used to. I would actually take a more controversial position on why that is, because for a lot of people, they think of the black church as primarily a service provision organization. It's basically the NAACP, but with a sort of a spiritual twist to it. I would argue that the black church has lost a lot of its significance because it stopped preaching the gospel, and it's losing people because as more and more black folk became more economically independent and more upwardly mobile, the need for a service provision organization went away. and the church's relevance has waned a lot since, Dr. King's age. But I'm sure for a lot of Democratic pollsters, they still think that the church is the way to go. But in 50 years, I would be curious to see, what that looks like.
Is that good or bad?
Which part?
The loss of influence from the church.
Oh, it's terrible. I think in general, the loss of the decline in religious affiliation is bad for the country. And I say it this way, and I realize people have all different types of political views and theological views, and I respect that. I do think that there's a place in the public square for religious people. I think that this last couple of years has shown that there's an innate need in humanity to worship something. For a lot of us, politics has filled that void.
Yeah.
That religion used to fill. And that's why you see, the sort of political partisanship almost take on a religious feel. Now, I would sort of make the argument tongue in cheek that for the right, that looks a little bit more Catholic, small c. So where you have a figure like Trump, who almost functions as a pope, the things that he says to some of his supporters, that he says from his office, ex cathedra, are almost like the gospel to them. Mm-hmm. And on the left, I would liken that more to a more Protestant, small p type of religion, because there's always something to protest. There's always it's environmentalism, it's racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, and that desire to find something to give my life some meaning. You see that playing out in our day-to-day discourse on politics and in every other area. So I think, again, as a Christian, I would obviously I want to advance a biblical Christian worldview. I realize other people have different views, but I think part of what makes America America is to have that public square, and I think protecting that, I think of Frederick Douglass. He talked about the 3 boxes of liberty. He talked about the jury box, the ballot box, and the cartridge box.
Was that Frederick Douglass?
Yeah. I would add a 4th
man.
one, the soap box.
Oh.
Right. And I think having a robust First Amendment where people can come and debate and discuss issues, whether they have the same worldview, the same political ideology or not, that's something that we need to have a healthy, functioning republic.
Was that Frederick Douglass said that? Cartridge
pretty
box?
sure.
I don't know if they had cartridges. What?
Oh, no, they definitely had cartridges back in the
look it up.
1800s. Yeah.
Look
The
it up.
3 boxes of liberty. I'm not sure if he was the first person to say it, but he's probably the most famous person to talked about the 3 boxes of liberty.
Right on.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good quote either way. Man, it just makes me. I think we have a shared moral framework, whatever this faction might end up being.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a Christian. I grew up Catholic briefly. I do believe in God, but I have my own weird spirituality and worldview or whatever. But I do have a moral framework that is built upon the traditions of Judeo-Christian faith, and I obviously recognize that, and I think a lot of people in America do. And one of the examples I often use is Bill Maher. Bill Maher very clearly holds values that are rooted in a Judeo-Christian moral framework, notably the right of the innocent to be you're innocent until proven guilty,
Right.
which is rooted in Blackstone's formulation, which is rooted in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. If there's but one righteous person, and I will not destroy the cities.
Right.
But the woke don't have that moral framework.
No.
They have a lack of a moral framework. And so I've been thinking about this for a while, about why it is that we're so diametrically opposed and what the factions really are. And I'm like, well, they don't have a moral framework at all. Yesterday they can say X is good. Tomorrow they'll say X is bad.
Right.
If
enough people say that X is bad.
Right. So there's no grounded moral framework. It's literally just what the group says is so. Whereas for me, I'm like, I don't care what the group says. I know my moral framework.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think a lot of our political debates are sort of geometric debates, right? It's about drawing lines. The question is, where is the line going to be drawn and by what standard? So the left definitely is religious. As I said, it's just that religion may be a religion of self. It may be, a religion of scientism or safetyism. But the way that the woke sort of frame their arguments, oftentimes in a religious, with religious language, slavery and racism as original sin, right? talking about issues like reparations as it relates to paying off a debt, which again draws on some Christian language in terms of what believers believe that Christ did on the cross, right? To pay a debt for sinners. The problem with the woke's religion is that its God is never fully and finally satisfied. So the Christian believes that Christ paid our sin debt on the cross with his death, burial, and resurrection. But for the left, its God is never propitiated. There's
no forgiveness.
No forgiveness. So they believe in sin the same way that I do, right? Microaggressions, that's what it is. It's, small sins. I mispronounce your name. I thought you were the wrong Hispanic guy in the office. Oh, and now I have to get, smacked on the hand by HR. So they believe in some of the same principles in terms of sin and offense and atonement. It's just as I said, their God is never satisfied. And I think you see that saga, that cosmic saga is playing out in our politics on a day-to-day basis.
It'll be interesting in 10 years when these kids either, I hear a lot of stories that young kids are anti-woke because they're telling their teachers, who wants to be like their teacher?
Yeah.
The teacher comes out and the teacher's a loser. The kids don't view the teachers as cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's always, I learned this, taking engineering, like there's always, you swing a pendulum one way, it eventually is going to swing back. I'd be curious to see what that looks like. Whether kids take on a certain anti-authoritarian strain. Sometimes it's hard to see that because when I see kids who are 4 and 5 years old, when as soon as they get out of the car, the first thing they're doing is reaching for their mask. Even my 2-year-old, now he's 3. At the time he was 2, we would go somewhere. And he said, "Dad, where's my mask?" And I'm like, "Man, you don't need a mask. We're outside. We're in the park. Just go and play." But a lot of our kids are being conditioned in the same way that adults are. And I hope what we don't end up seeing is an even larger increase in anxiety and depression and neuroticism and all the other things that we've been seeing play out for, the better part of the last 20 years.
Yeah, man. Well, we can be optimistic to the best of our abilities.
For sure.
I teeter back and forth sometimes depending on what's going on. There's optimism in, we already shouted out Michael Malice, shout him out again. He's very optimistic. He says these people are so dumb. How could you possibly be pessimistic? And I'm like, it's not a bad point, but zombies are dumb and a lot of zombies can overrun a city, so. That's
true. My hope is that eventually people's eyes will open. So whether it's foreign policy in Afghanistan, whether it's people who were saying defund the police last year, saying refund the police this year, all of these issues, the socialist who fires all of his employees who want to unionize.
That was so good.
What I'm hoping is that people see that the people that we think are elites and the smartest people in our society have no idea what they're doing. And honestly, in many respects, like we were talking about homeschooling, nobody has done more to advocate and advance the cause of school choice and homeschooling than the teachers' unions. They have done a way better job of promoting homeschooling than any GOP politician ever could. Mm-hmm. So when you see how not just corrupt, but incompetent the leadership class is, it'll make people say, you know what? Why should I listen to these people? They have no idea what they're talking about anything. So
yeah, right on. Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.